So then we are back with more understanding from the time of the Second Tabernacle services where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end, period Shiach the prophet. Then we find the time of the restoration of the holy cities as it was during the time of Yohanan until 1009. So then let's understand what goes on with the world's market, as then the politician Daniel has explained. He was a trader. He was also a person involved with freight. He was a person of industry, and he was responsible for the log of the incomings of the kingdom. As we understand, he was a person related with other countries for the benefit of the country where he was at, either Babylon or the Medes or the Persians. So then, we find many areas of these understanding of the time of the end and the trade coming from China. There is absolutely no question regarding then what's coming in the future. There is a Chinese system coming, very reliable, and it is property of the Chinese government. In order for you to be part of it, you have to be responsible. But then there is a very interesting part of it, then encouraging you of being responsible. Every time you make an investment, you always have a positive return. Every time. Why? Because the trade of China has a socialist military objective. This means every person then can have a share of the investments. So then, coming from the east, we understand the Pacific is then preparing themselves, because there are many areas of the Pacific where you find in islands, you find in nations, preparing themselves for the future of this new system. It's going to have many exciting times of the new system. And then we find ourselves prior of this system shortly 36 months. So then what would be a word of wisdom regarding then those who are preparing themselves for the system? Very simple. Find a reasonable computer and then have a rack. For instance, rack with 5 hard drives with at least a couple of terabytes lining up very nicely, put in a box and then placed aside. Make sure you have then the system of your own, the operating system. Make sure you have then the basics of making then the computer very fast, because as we understand in New Zealand very wisely, they are having a partnership with a company over there where you can have as much as 100 megabytes per second. So it's very fast. The same system used by the banks. Does it surprise you? So then, when you begin your understanding then later when the system comes, what would be then the first understanding of the investments? Would be then a transfer of your funding from your savings, obviously, into the system. And then your idea is, can we hide the system so we don't pay tax? Well, that's the whole purpose. But then they would say, oh, but it is not contradicting of what the Messiah has said. Yes, it does. Because the governments are at fault. They are not doing what the Messiah told them to do. Are they monitoring then the 10%? No, they are not. In many cases, they don't even trace the savings of the people. So then, when then the system comes and the people are going to make purchase, and then they are going to have their items sometimes over there coming via the system, and please have in mind, there is not yet delineated as far as purchasing an investment, but also have in mind having products sold in it. So let's leave some space for then the development of this system. At the moment, we understand for sure then is investment and purchases. But then, since it is so much of a great sensation, let aside a bit of a space so then you can link up this system with having, for instance, vintage items around the world sold with the system. So thus far there is not much information regarding this area, but then investments and purchases, absolutely sure. But then when it comes, the first understanding is then a transfer of funding. What it takes is then the initial capital. So for instance, islands of the Pacific, where they have very limited resources, it would be extremely important of having gold or then a form of money very active and stable for the next 36 months. The initial capital is absolutely crucial, because when they invest in the system, they begin to earn, and it is automatic. Automatic earnings. You earn and then you invest. You earn and you reinvest. Only have this in mind. There is then a ratio of what you invest, and then timing, and then purchases around the world of the particular item you think would be the best. So then you receive then a share of it, and understand it won't be very big if you consider only an item. But if you multiply by 900,000 other items, then becomes very interesting. So then, how do we understand from the scripture this new system? Very simple. Daniel the prophet, he spoke of tabernacling, and Daniel the politician spoke of the layer of the Gentile understanding. How do we make this understanding so vivid? It's because of the base of the statue. Second chapter of Daniel gives you then the entire statue, but then later the third, fourth, fifth, sixth chapter, and then sections of later chapters gives you then a few layers of understanding of the explanation of many kinds of metals related with the statue, each of them signifying then a kingdom, except the base of the statue. Then the 11th chapter of Daniel gives you sections of it which explains then the time of restoration. Then you begin your quest understanding then the nations, how they would act with each other. So when you read, for instance, Persia and then other countries, those were regions of the time of Daniel. But since he was explaining centuries in the future, he had to make a reference of the regions of his time. So when you are reading, for instance, during the time of the restoration and reduction, you find in regions of the world of Daniel's time. Then you have to understand the layering and the integrity of these layers. They must be harmonized. Then you understand the relationship in our time. Gives you then, when you layer precisely the second with the 12th chapter is the time of the end. But then, regarding then the statue and the base of it, you find the 11th chapter then showing you the relationship of the many nations or kingdoms. And we are during this time of restoration and also reduction. So then, how do we understand precisely that the system is coming? Very simple. 12th chapter, the angel spoke, and he said then, close up the understanding and leave for the time of the end, because people would go to and fro and knowledge would increase. To and fro means confusion. There is then 1,000 years of deceit. From 1009 to 2009, it was a time of no tabernacling. Thus the term New World Order. But we are no longer during the time of the deceit. We are during the time of the dragon. We are during the time of precision. So every time you understand in the 20th chapter of Galah or Revelation, then you find 1,000 years of the Mashiach, 1,000 years of Nahashatan. And then you find very many names of Nahashatan because you have to understand in Hebrew. The original scriptures came from Hebrew, but then you are reading in Greco language. But the concept must be tabernacling, with the reference of tabernacling. So then, the many names of Nahashatan, for instance, devil, or then Satan, or then Nahashatan, you find then dragon, serpent. We are during the time of the dragon. Indicating then the Chinese system, isn't that interesting? There is a dragon. And knowledge would increase. So then, from a viewpoint of a person, such as the prophet Daniel explaining later tabernacling, but then at the same time being a politician, a person doing trade amongst the nations, very acquainted with the freighting, for instance, what would be your position if you were granted as a politician regarding trade and then you say knowledge would increase? When you begin your increasing of knowledge of trade, what do you do with it? You increase your trade, do you not? But then knowledge would increase, and then indicating a system to come. In order for people to understand tabernacling versus the world, you have to have a system where you absolutely must recognize there is a creator. And the creator has provided a system where people can log on and then earn. They have to do the regular work, because if you only stay in a computer, you become obese. Now we have to go to work, we have to exercise, and then move ourselves around. Granted that many people in the future, they are not going to do work outside, they're going to be 24/7 in a computer. Then people can recognize the huge, it's absolutely very big, the amount of trade. Because the first understanding is you log on the system, you have a direct relation with the Chinese government. You have to be responsible though. And then you are given a list of products where you can invest. You invest on product or products. And then as you earn, you can make purchases. Can you imagine the number of parcels around the world? And increasing of ships and aircrafts, trucks. But in order for this demand then to be satisfied, must have more raw materials, more fuel, more freighters. So if you have initial capital, you can absolutely invest either mining, transportation, seafaring. Those are going to be very big, because the Mashiach already gave the answer. And the freighters of the earth. He didn't say kingdoms. He didn't say nations. He said freighters. And there is a reason why he said freighters. Because the freighters are going to be in charge. Did not the Mashiach said, he precisely then, the authority was given to him in heaven and the earth to go therefore around the world and form holy cities, tabernacling? He was speaking from being the chief, from being in charge, from being the leader. And the leader is saying, then the freighters of the earth, he's saying they are going to be in charge. Because he shifts from tabernacling to the world level and he said, freighters. So then imagine the banking around the world of people absolutely wiping out their savings and investing in the system. Banks are going to be working in skeleton status because they won't have savings anymore for themselves to invest. You know what they have to do? They have to work with partnership with the government, make sure they are producing. Because countries that are not producing, they're going to be bankrupt. Politicians are out of work. There is no more space for politicians. Why? Because the freighters are in charge. So then, when savings are gone, people are making purchases online. They are buying, for instance, product for half of the price, sometimes not paying freight, and more than likely won't pay tax because the governments are so slow with their thinking because they are so long, scoundrelizing themselves and gorging themselves with somebody else's money, and they are not thinking properly. What is it going to become of a government if they are not producing? Then banks, they can have funding. Then they can't pay their people. Checking is going to be absolutely skeleton. In other words, we're speaking of a very low income. However, if then the nation is charging taxes as they should have, where do we find the answers? Freighters. Okay, and then the Messiah said, and the freighters of the earth, what do you understand taxation with freighting? Would you not use the labeling system of the freighters to make sure the governments would charge taxes? So then we can expect a lot of movements of cargo. The problem is, are you going to receive your package? At the moment, this is the huge question the nations are asking. Are they going to receive their packages? Because as the world becomes more educated of what's coming, they can realize thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people from many nations, they are going to be ordering their packages. The problem is the Postal Service of every country going to have then people to do the work and deliver the packages? Knowing that overnight when a person downloads the system in their computers, then savings is gone, checking bare minimum, people working and investing and working and investing, they want their packages. Then the government not charging taxes, and they can't print out more money, then they can't pay their people. So let's try rationalize these understanding from the normal. Any country going through crisis, they must lean up. If a government during the time of financial crisis is not leaning up, it's because they are retarded. They must lean up. If the government is doing the contrary, it's because there is abuse. You can expect a military dictatorship and your rights violated, because it is against what is normal. It's not protection. Protection you encourage when you provide, as a nation, ways for trade to increase. When the government becomes abusive, then they don't lean up, they don't provide what they should have, they make very strange plans for the future, and they hide every time. You can expect dictatorship and your rights violated in the very near future. But then people, they want their packages. How is the government going to pay their people and expand? How are they going to work with freighters? Our postal service is nearly bankrupt. If they are around for the next 36 months and then the system comes, how are they going to handle so many packages? By then, our monetary system is down. How the government is going then to get on with it? It simply can't. It gets seized up. Because when the label, a freight label, is then printed, then the company is responsible for the delivery of it. So people can expect panic in the future if the government does not start taxing. Absolutely panic from everywhere. Because people won't get paid, states people won't get paid, because they can't generate more money, you understand? There is no market value. Then how are they going to get then raw materials? How they want maintenance of the power plants? And anarchy then is counterbalanced with military dictatorship. That's why there is the Ozarks over there, you know, underground highways and so on and so forth. It's already indicating what's coming in the future: anarchy, panic. But then, analyzing from the viewpoint of the Messiah, if we tax properly, then we can avoid this scenario. So you can expect then, for instance, the great freighters, UPS, FedEx, making decisions for our country. It's very evident. Politicians, they're going to be out of work. And the very few they're going to be behind, they're going to be extremely lean. And if they screw up, they get blasted in the media. It won't be anymore these mamby-pamby politicians, you know, get up in the morning and they have a van over there, or then a car waiting for them with the chauffeur. Then going over there to work, go over there, and then there is a breakfast and lunch, the whole situation paid for. They can start changing their agendas. Consider those scoundrels out of work. And no person is going to hack into the system. The dragon won't let. Because it's a new spiritual transition taking place. So then, very exciting times, but make sure then there is a balance, because the temptation of staying in the computer 24/7 and earn as much as you can is going to be there very strongly. And quite honestly, some people don't even going to have a certification of anything, because what it takes is only study of the computer, having a very high capable memory-wise speaking computer, very fast with a very nice link, and then the rest of his investment. And boy, oh boy, if the government does not do its job, the media are going to blast them to pieces. They're going to be persecuted everywhere. What's going on with the roads? Why it's not then fixed? What's going on with electricity? Why are not delivering the packages? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do the other? And they are going to give answers. And if they don't do it, they are fired. That's how it's going to be in the future. So then we understand when the Messiah said freighters, those are freighters. Isn't that profound? Freighters would be in charge, because you're speaking from a person that is in charge. The Messiah is in charge. As mighty as you can think a government can be, you're going to be surprised. They are not taxing as they should have. And if they don't take action from next 36 months, make sure that every time there is a label printed, then the government have tax deduction from every parcel. And the objective is not complicated. As long as the government has a half a brain to do the work, and then we doubt because they don't, then the job is make sure every time there is a label printed, then the government deducts taxes. So if comes to the country then quadruple amount of packages overnight, those are then taxed. So then the demand for expansion of the postal service in the future then is counterbalanced with the taxes gathered prior of starting the work. Isn't that smart? So then let's read more.